Hello, Judy from the Quilting Bee in Massillon, Ohio, and I am here today because I want to share with you a new Emily Taylor pattern that we have gotten in, the Ladybug. And I'm crazy about this because although it's labeled beginner to intermediate, I see it as an excellent collage for the beginner collagers also. It isn't very large. It measures, I think, about 6.5 by 7.5. And so that's very doable in a fairly short period of time. So what do we do once we have the pattern? Well, what we do is, first of all, decide if we're going to do it on a foundation panel, which is where you would trace it onto a translucent cotton fabric, probably a white or off-white, a muslin, something that you can easily see your pattern through. Or, let me get this out. This is our pattern. Or you're going to trace it onto parchment paper. And parchment paper will enable us to peel it off once we have completed it and apply it to any background we might want to. I'm going to be using the parchment paper because I would like for those beginners who have been in my classes to also begin to see how we use parchment paper. So that's what I have done. I have taken this pattern and I have copied it onto this piece of parchment paper. And my parchment paper I have then mounted onto one of my little design boards that stay here by my sewing machine because my true design board is still covered with the old lady in the shoe. And I may never see it again, but I am making some progress on it. So I'm going to switch the camera to where you can see what I see. So I have my ladybug traced as well as the indicators for the value changes, and I have labeled them. I have labeled them to help me remember the values. So in my blacks, there's only 2 values. I see a dark and a lighter. So that was not an issue. But when I got down to my reds, let's look at the reds. This is not white. This is just indicating the lightest value of my reds. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red values. So that's quite a few. I normally work with 3, sometimes 4, but 5 is a pretty good number. So to help me identify that, I have gone ahead and said B2, black 2, black 1, black 2, red 2. I've given them names so I can help remember exactly where I need to start thinking about changing the value of my fabric, the color. So my tools are my board, which is foam board covered in flannel. I have my Karen Buckley scissors already. I have a pencil, and I have a pencil because if I cover this area of red 3, I may want to indicate it over in here so I don't forget the value I'm working with in this space. So I do have a pencil handy. I have my handy little triangular shaped clover iron, which we'll get into later. I have some black fabric pulled, and I just pulled a variety because I only need 2 values. There's very little area that I'm going to be covering. So I have some I can use for lights I have some light in here. This will work for my dark, even though it's green with some black. Dark green, dark blue, dark purple, all will work for black. They all read black. And I can use some of this in here. So just, I didn't worry a lot about the blacks. They're ready. But when I got to my reds, then I had to pay a little more attention. So I laid out all of my reds and I sorted them according to value, the way I see it. No two people will place everything in the same category, but this is the way I saw them. So I have my number ones, my lightest, my number twos, threes, fours, and my fives, which are my darkest. So they go around this way. And I have between 4 and 5 of each value, more than I will need, but it gives me a nice variety to work with. Now I have mounted them on this palette just for a show. I will just have them laying here at my work table when I actually get started. All right, we are ready to start. I'm going to start here at the bottom. You can see that my design board is in a flat position, which is contrary to what I've always told you should do, that it should be upright so you can back away and see how it's looking. My upright, as I mentioned, is covered with the old lady in the shoe. I can't use it. But also primarily with it being a parchment process and it probably being new to you, it will be easier for you to become acquainted with this technique on a flat surface. That will help the fabric stay where you place it until you give it a little bit of heat with our special little iron. So that's what we're doing. Now, here's my darkest red. Right below it is some light red. And that's because we are trying to create the vision of a rounded object. So where it is curving down under, it's beginning to get light. It isn't getting all the shadow that is showing on top. So I have that labeled number 2, and I'm going to pull some of my number 2s here, take my scissors out, and sort of follow that shape. I see it is rounded, and so that's what I'm going to try to emulate. And I will audition it, and I think it's going to work just fine. You can use a pen to get the back paper off. I have more luck with my fingernails, so it's with whatever works for you. But I'm going to lay that in place, and it is adhering to my parchment paper very well. It is not moving, so I'm not going to be concerned with heating it a little bit. All right, continuing on with more of that color. I need a little bit right down in here. It's a very odd shape. I'm just eyeballing it and sort of trying to fit the shape as well as I can. And I will see how that looks, and that looks fine because I want an overlap. So I am overlapping into where that black will be, and I will be applying my black shortly. So there we are. And I'm now going to do my R2 over here. Before I do that though, I'm going to get the shape of this little black section. And it's, how is it shaped? Let's just sort of eyeball it. and come back around. There's probably a name for this shape that is not coming to mind. But let's see. It's a little large. Let's make it a little smaller. It's easier to go down in size than go up. So you can see I'm just freehanding this, and well, it's still a little long there. Doesn't have to be exact, but it should be a close proximity. Okay. And here I go. Oops, threw away the wrong thing. Okay, let's lay this in, and that will fit fine. So I can go ahead, finish up with my lighter reds. This is not staying as well. And until there is more fabric for it to adhere to, I'm going to very gently just heat that a little bit, not the overlap, because I may change my mind on one of these pieces and want to use something else. So I don't want them adhered together. But now when I lay this in place, I can see it has two pieces of fabric to adhere to. I need a little bit right there. I don't know if I need to worry about that, but I'm going to do something there anyway. So you see how I lifted that up to put that in place. And now I'm putting those back. So that's it. So now I'm going into my darkest area. Again, still sort of a round, curved space here. And shaping it as best I can to fit into the space indicated. Remembering these are just suggestions. These are not carved in stone. They're just saying, think about starting to use a different value in this area. A little large. And I'm lifting here as a unit and putting them back down. Feel with your fingers if you have too much, if they're not laying flat. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, I'm not worrying too much about the shapes I'm cutting out. I'm just trying to fit it in and minimize my overlap, making certain I have some, but I don't want it getting so thick that it will be too bulky when I go to quilt this. Okay, I'm overlapping this black dot, so I'll have to remember to put that in. And let's go to this one. You see, I've used this particular color before, this particular fabric. One of these days I'll show you how I keep my fabric. Everyone has their own little gimmick or their own little thought process, and the space you have available also determines how you can store or segregate your fabric according to its use. And I have the same one basically in both houses. It's just they are housed differently. Okay, That's my deepest red. I'm now going to put that black dot in before I forget about it. Just has to be a dot in there. Okay, I will lay that in. And I'm going to do this one, which really has an odd shape to it. That does not want to stay. So I will gently give it a suggestion, not coming over where it's overlapping, staying where it's alone. Okay, I'm going to continue working here and just move along. I'm using cutting in with a wake up. See this interesting shape from some previous cuts? I think that's will be interesting there. So I'm going to include those little shapes, or try to. Let's see if I'm successful. Well, not really. Just going to use that portion. But sometimes let your fabric work for you if it can. That's the whole point I'm making. If it's already in an interesting shape and you can utilize it, go for it. So I am going to use that right there. And that will work. Using my fingernail technique doesn't always work. So at some point I have to recognize failure and go with another process. Overlapping slightly. Here I'm going with the shape of my fabric and it works pretty well there. So I'm just going to let it do its thing. Okay, I am back because I had run out of space on the video, and when I came back I realized I had an error in here. So I lifted. That's the advantage of not pressing a piece to another piece. I realized that I had an error in here. I had skipped over one section, and so I was suddenly going into R2 and I didn't have a good transition into it. So I made the correction, put in my other two dots, and I am ready to go with R2. A little tedious in here because I am losing my numbers. I need a little more of my B2 right under these. I ended up in my little break here just going ahead and filling in my lights, and then realized that I wasn't real sure what this was to be, because the picture looks, I'm not sure. It looks like it should maybe almost be black up here. So I'm just going to maybe put a little black right in here. I don't know. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. These pieces are getting a little small, so when they become a little small, what I like to do is cut out the piece I'm going to use, and then I will overlay with something lighter. And then I will go a little lighter in there. So I am adhering that light gray to the darker gray. Leave that go. And I'm going to do the same thing up here where it's lighter, one of my lighter grays, and then dark in the center. When I got to thinking about these blacks, I realized I probably didn't need 2 or 3 more. So if you have any recollection at all, you can see that I have added these 3 grays to my original 3 or 4 that I had. You can never have too broad of a range to choose from. I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to place that on that larger piece. And this has kept me from having to do a lot of little teeny tiny pieces. I've just gone ahead and made the interior piece that I wanted and applied it to. All right, now we're going to do all of these antlers and legs, and those could get to be very tedious, couldn't they? Because they are thin. But there is a little trick we can use when we are trying to replicate small areas. And what we're going to do is peel back our steamer seam a little bit, lay it over what we want, the piece we're trying to trace, and I will trace it on the steamer seam bringing it into the body because we have to have some overlay. And I don't know if you can see my drawing, but I can see where I've drawn, and I can easily cut that shape out. This will have to be encouraged to stay there. But I know I'm keeping it, so I'm just going to go ahead and attach it to the reds. So there we are on that one. And I will do the other 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we will be finished. Okay, I have my parchment paper with my little ladybug on it. And what I am going to do is with a hot iron, no steam, I'm going to just press all along my collage, just doing enough to really secure each piece to its neighbor. So I think that's enough. And that is going to enable me to maybe, that didn't want to come up, so let's see. I may help it a little bit. Okay, there we go. These little legs and all might try to have a mind of their own. Like that one. There we go. All in one piece. And I have my fabric that I'm going to apply him to, pressed and ready. Amanda had suggested this one and brought it down with her. I was afraid it was going to be too dark, but I don't think it will be. So, well, I don't know. Maybe he does get lost on that. Okay, I think I like this better. It's a new fabric that she brought down to me. It was sort of like Christmas when she got here and brought me several of our new fat quarters. So I think though I'm going to go with this. And I will press it good. And then what I'm going to do is lay him on whatever size I end up deciding to use. I normally don't go much larger than my item. Emily is suggesting you make a pillow top out of this, so however you're going to use it, I though will probably not go much larger than she is. And then I will really steam it good. Steam, 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 steam. 2 or 3 times, both front and back. Then I will make my decision if I want to embellish with some fussy cuts. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to need to cut a larger piece. So I will think about that, and you will see the finished product in the shop after I decide. But that is the process when you're doing a parchment technique of collage. And I think it went pretty well. I like the peeling off part, and then you can audition your different backgrounds. So enjoy, good luck, and be sure and let us know how yours turns out. Bye now.